some opinions, and some anecdotal examples and other data that I have come by. This is a city commissioner about a month ago at a city commission meeting saying what we have been doing is not working. She said this after her house was hit by 3 rounds that went into 3 different rooms, at least 1 round of which went through 2 internal walls and eventually lodged in a ceramic wall in her bathroom. It is believed to the result of 2 passing cars in a street shooting fight. Youth crime. This is the most recent report, again, about a month ago, by police and the prosecutor, saying that youth crime is down about 22%, but still expressing grave concern about more serious crimes, home invasions, auto thefts. Strangely enough, no mention of shooting. Here's the real report when you dig down into it and get beyond the media release that the city gave you. And you'll see here that, yes, overall crimes are down 22%, but violent crimes of juveniles are down only about 3%, basically the same as the year before. Can you lower that projector just a smidge so I get the top line on this? There we go. Thank you very much. And by the way, that's a good example that the news reports are often merely what has been given to them by a governmental agency or by a business. And you have to often drill down into it, particularly when it just states a percentage, to try to look for the supporting data, which often yields a little bit different story than what the report itself does. Information is very hard to find about this topic. At the April 2025 retreat of the City Commission, in terms of the Kalamazoo Public Safety Department, the City Commission asked them as a goal to have a 15% reduction in repeat juvenile contacts. I don't know what that means, all right? And also to increase, and this is really important, increase camera streams by 15%. KDPS does publish on the internet what's called a shots fired incident report. It's really hard to find. In 2024, there were 319 such reports. Of those, 186 were, quote, verified, unquote. I am told by the police officers I've talked to is that means they found a bullet casing, the remainder after the bullet was fired, a shell casing, or a person or a piece of property was verified as being hit. The report I took this one from is from February to August of this year. It's a total of 12 and a half pages like this. It contains 150 incidents for 6 months. And note, that's number of incidents. It's not the number of shots fired, even though the report is called a shots fired incident report. There's a separate, this is how easy it is to find. It's only 7 clicks deep in the Department of Public Safety report. One of which is you have to scroll through a list of 93 crimes before you find the one marked shots fired incidents. This is a separate one. This is called a shooting report. Although it seemed to me that if shots were fired, it was a shooting, but they do it separately. And this one has more to do with somebody being hit. Again, for the same period of time from March through August, it was 2 pages or a total of 24. Those reports, by the way, they have an incident number on them. But if you click on that, what you get is a message that says file a Freedom of Information Act request. And I can tell you from personal experience, even when I was running for mayor, a FOIA request to the city of Kalamazoo takes usually 3, 4, 5, or 6 different attempts and months before you get a substantive response back. They don't want you to know about that. Some myths. Street shootings are restricted to the north side and the east side of the city. That's not true. Here's a Kalamazoo violent crime report. The highest violent crimes are in red, and then they fade on down to white. You can see that the crimes are virtually all over. Moreover, if anybody thinks these crimes are related only to the north and east side, I have a one-word response, and that's IHOP. Just a few weeks ago, there were somewhere between 6 and 8 youths, kids, in the IHOP on South Westage Avenue. It's located south of Mars Thrifty Acres. They apparently ate a meal, left without paying, and then got into a gunfight in the parking lot. Again, probably out of 2 or more vehicles. Myths. Bullets cannot hit me, meaning you. A lot of people think that because they say, well, I don't hang out with street shooters. I don't go to the places where those occur. I don't deal in drugs or the activities that street shooters are commonly involved in. And to that again, I answer baloney. Every bullet goes somewhere. This is why it would be important for us to know how many shots are fired. You can see from these reports from past times, obviously the commissioner's house got hit. She was not the target of it. It's just that her house got hit because it was in the area on her street. We've had a bystander hit. We've had a man killed when a stray bullet went through an apartment door. We've had a bystander killed. We've had WMU apartments and vehicles hit. And most recently at Howard and Michigan Avenue, we had 4 shot and 1 injured by, quote, by debris, unquote. I don't know what that means. It probably means the bullet hit something and tossed it up and caused an injury. And the police report included dozens were endangered. Our police chief in the past has recorded incidents in which over 60 shots were fired and others in which 50 shell casings were found and another in which 20 shots were fired. As I mentioned, every bullet goes somewhere. This is the street shooter's weapon of choice. It's a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. You can see these also have some larger magazines called extended magazines. A regular one fitting into the grip might fire 8, 10, 9 bullets. Those extended magazines will fire a much larger number. And the maximum range of that 9mm is about 1/4 to 1/2 mile, depending on the ammunition it fires, the skill of the shooter, and where the gun is pointed. That means that in the case of that IHOP shooting, if you were shopping at Mars Thrifty Acres at that time, you were within range. We had a shootout on Michigan Avenue over here a couple Julys ago. 2 passing vehicles, not disclosed number of shots fired, probably between 20 and 30. A 9mm round would go through one of these windows. They also talk a lot about homicides and limiting homicides, and certainly that's important. They don't talk much about the injuries. They say, well, people were hit, but it wasn't, there was no death. It was not life-threatening. Well, I think it's important to think about the fact that everybody that gets hit by a bullet is severely injured. I'm no orthopod, but this is a pretty well-accepted chart that shows when a bullet like a 9mm goes into a human body, it causes, first of all, something they call a temporary cavity, which is a pretty big gap. And that cavity destroys everything that it expands into. organs, bones, whatever. If it does hit a bone, then the second one shows that often the bullet will fragment, and fragments of the bullet will go all through the body. I've had one client that was wounded by a bullet in the back. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. I've had two family members wounded by bullets. One, two wounds in his ceramic armor vest, another one elsewhere in the body. Every one of those causes injuries, and often they are injuries that last for the entire lifetime. When you read the reports about street shootings around here, be it the news media or the law enforcement, they don't tell you much about the extent of the injury or the type of the injury, and nobody follows up on it to see what happens to the people. Here's one very recently, just a week ago, from a 15-year-old. This is seized, that's a big extended magazine with holding lots of rounds. This gizmo is called an optic. It projects a laser beam which assists in being able to aim the weapon if it's properly coordinated with the weapon. And that's what an 8mm round can look, or 9mm round can look like. Here's another one. This is from July this year, when in the course of a few days, 10 different teenagers were arrested, and their weapons included these. You can see that they've got the 9mm, but they've got extended mags. This one is one where the pistol can be inserted into a rifle type weapon with a longer barrel, giving it an even longer range, probably greater accuracy. And ammunition, a 9mm round, and then this much larger round, which has a lot more explosive charge in it, and therefore a lot more power. That was 10 teenagers within 3 days. There's something called a switch or an auto sear. The police tell me they're seeing more and more of these. A sear is a device which, in a semi-automatic weapon, or even when it's a single shot, in a semi-automatic weapon, once you pull the trigger, one round fires, it ejects the shell casing out, and the sear holds the hammer back so that when the semi-automatic loads another round into the barrel, the hammer doesn't go forward and fire it right away. You have to pull the trigger again. An auto sear cancels that out such that when you pull the trigger, the device keeps on firing till it runs out of ammunition. It essentially turns a semi-automatic weapon into an automatic weapon. And that is what is often used when the 9mm pistol is loaded into the rifle-like device. Block handgun is the illegal switch becomes now it can fire up to 30 rounds just in a second. Increasingly, it's that second part of that video that is becoming what happens during a shots fired incident, a shooting, a street shooting in Kalamazoo. Here's a KVET seizure from a couple days ago. Again, wide series of weapons, most of them built on 9mm pistols, but many extended magazines. This one, a huge extended magazine mounted into a rifle-like thing, and I don't know whether that's a 9mm mounted in there or whether it's a separate weapon. They did not describe that. And we don't find out much about whether these have auto sears or not on them, although the police tell me they see more and more of them these days. You notice also there are drugs there, and many times these street shooters are associated with drug deals and drug distribution. Many of the street shooters are arguments about that between them and between their distribution areas. Here's another one. I have to keep on revising this, by the way, because this one's just this morning. All right. It's from the 22nd of September. But here you see that these 9mm both have the optics, the laser aims on them. There's also something called a Pro Mag. Um, that's the extended magazine, and it inserts into the handle of the 9 millimeter, and that holds up to 50 rounds. It's like an old Thompson submachine gun that you see on the TV and in the movies. That's what a 9 millimeter round looks like. That's what a larger round, I don't know how large it is because it didn't say, but it obviously is carrying a much more explosive charge, much larger explosive charge than the others, and it's what that Pro Mag is designed to do. If politicians know how handguns work, they don't. That's one of the reasons I think they have trouble doing anything effectively to control them. Many of you probably don't know how handguns work. Uh, I don't want you to go away without having a new experience. So these are what are called dummy bullets. They're pretend 9 millimeter rounds. Uh, they can't be loaded, they can't be fired. Would you help me pass these out? Maybe give one to each table and let you see what they're like. Again, the brass part on the bottom is where the powder is held. The orange part is the bullet that is fired out. Uh, and the brass part is the casing, which then is ejected out of the weapon after it is fired. To make your experience complete, uh, this is a dummy gun. It cannot fire, could not be fired at all. It's just made out of plastic. Uh, and a standard magazine would be loaded right in here. Uh, let's follow normal procedures. And that means that you treat every weapon as if it's loaded. You do not put your finger on the trigger. You keep it away from the trigger and the trigger guard. You do not point it at anyone or anything unless you are going to kill them. And if you do fire it, you must make sure of what your downrange safety is. You have to know the maximum range of your weapon and your ammunition. Best thing to do is just keep this one pointed at the ceiling. I want you to hold it so you understand how light it is, how easy it is for even a very modestly aged child to tuck it in their waistband and carry it around, because that's exactly what happens. And this is one of the reasons why it's one of their favored weapons. Well, it's called a red gun or a dummy gun, all right, because it's not a real one. They make these so that people who actually carry these weapons can practice pulling them out of a holster, putting them into a holster. But I want you to just take a look at them and realize how light it is. If we had a full magazine in, might weigh a pound or a pound and a half more, but still not much. Street shooters are not very good shots. They, they tend to use the gangster thing one-handed, uh, which sends the bullet off in directions other than what it's intended. And that's what makes it more dangerous to you and me and to bystanders, because most of the shots miss. You will see common reports that say intended victim was not hit. All right. Well, every bullet goes somewhere. That's the front of the IHOP store, taken the morning after the shooting, when 5 bullets went into the store through the window. People were in there eating. Just a miracle that no one was hurt. Myth: guns are the problem. I'm going to tell you right now, guns are not this problem. My own estimate is there's probably about 15,000 guns in Kalamazoo. I Nobody knows how many. We don't track them well enough to know that. That's 15,000, probably a low number. Regular surveys indicate in Michigan that 40% of our residents own a gun, and half of those people own more than one. A little bit more in rural areas, a little bit less in urban areas, but let's just take 15,000. Those are legal firearms. Those are firearms that are legally purchased, legally stored, legally used. Except for that many incidents out of the total, uh, they're not shot at anybody. They're used at shooting ranges, in competitions, hunting. activities like that. I often talk about Harry Potter's wand, and that is, if Harry Potter's wand was given to us and we could evaporate every single firearm in the city of Kalamazoo, the street shooters would have more tomorrow morning. They don't buy their stuff at On Target. All right, they get it out on the street in a black market that is constant and ever present and very tempting to them. Street shooters are the problem. It's the people that pull the trigger that are the problem. And in my opinion, they aren't getting nearly enough attention, and we aren't getting nearly enough information about them. Another myth, gangs are the problem. Well, not the gangs like the Sharks and the Jets and West Side Story. That's not what we're dealing with here. And by and large, the street shooters are not divided into ethnic gangs. They're not divided into white and black gangs. The really sad part of this is 90% or more of these shootings are black kids shooting at black kids. Nobody wants to talk about that. But every police officer you speak to will confirm it. Those that work with those that are apprehended in this will confirm it. The gangs we're talking about, if there are gangs, if you want to call them that, these are one or two or three people sometimes. They may be involved in drugs, they may not. It just may be their friends from the same block on the street. And it may be the reason for the gunfight is not drugs, it's because somebody looked the wrong way at my girlfriend. And their solution is to go after them with a gun. And then once they go after those guys with a gun, then those guys come back and go with the other people with a gun. By the way, too, you don't hear much about gangs because it's a 10-year felony. So the cops don't like to charge it. The prosecutor doesn't like to prosecute it, and the judge doesn't like to have gang crimes before them because they're presented with minimum sentences that they don't want to deal with. The effect is not equal. In Michigan, the leading cause of death of black kids, largely males, between ages 15 and 24 is homicide. Here's 1 week, and these are the ones where some of those guns were seized that I showed you earlier from the 7th to the 14th. There were 2 kids aged 19 and 8 under 18. Every one of them had a concealed weapon. Many of them had extended mags. We don't know whether they had auto sears or not, but they all had concealed weapons. Of those that were under 18, and I think the 18-year-old too, I believe all of them were released. We don't know finally what happened to them, but I'll have more about that in a minute. And we don't hear much about that after it happens. A myth. Here's one I'd like to strike down. You'll hear poverty is the problem. If we solve poverty, we wouldn't have this. I think there's a substantial amount of good material out there now that says, no, the opposite's true. Crime is a principal cause of poverty. If kids grow up in an area that's full of crime, they are destined to a life of poverty because they do not grow up to be productive human beings, responsible human beings. Obviously, family makeup, education, cultural habits, attitudes of both the community and the family, all very important parts of it. We've been trying to solve poverty for what, 75 years? Throwing billions of dollars at it. Some progress, yes, but we haven't paid any attention to the fact that crime may be a principal cause of it. Myth, new laws are the solution. Well, flash, street shooters don't obey laws to begin with. All right, so you can pass all the new laws you want. Most new laws, I think, are basically public relations for the office holders. It's their way of saying we're trying to do something about this, or we are doing something about it. Proposed laws, which if you read your news feeds, that's what most of them are. All right, the legislator's office or the governor or somebody, the president, Congress puts out a news release that says this law has been proposed. It almost reads like it's been adopted. Well, not so. In the present session of the Michigan legislature, there have been 1,400 proposed statutes submitted. How many have been passed so far? 12. 12. The legislatures can't agree to set a budget, either nationally or statewide. Do you really think they're going to take on a problem like this effectively? No, it's not going to happen. Yes, parents should be responsible. Well, of course they should. It's a great idea. The problem is, in many cases involving street shooters, the parents are incapable or unable or unwilling to do it. The parents often have more severe problems than the kids do, particularly when it comes to mental health, addiction, things of that nature. Moreover, sometimes the parents are involved. Sometimes what the kid's doing is protecting mom or dad and their drug business. Sometimes they are protecting mom or dad from retaliation from other shooters. Sometimes mom and dad agree with the shooter that they ought to be shooters. One of their expressions is, well, my son needs a gun to protect himself. He deserves to have one, even though he's a minor, even though it's illegal, even though it's a very dangerous weapon. Kids should be in school. Another great idea. It's too bad it isn't true. Chronic absentee rate here in Kalamazoo in 2023, 12,000 registered students, was 50%. That means on any given day, there could be as many as 6,000 kids out on the street roaming around. They aren't in school. Improved a little bit. 2024-25 report just came out last week or 10 days, and it's down to 39.2% chronic absentee, but that's still 4,700 kids. And the 6,000 that left in 2023 didn't necessarily come back. This could be a different 12,000 we're computing this percentage on. Again, the stories are very hard to figure out in this regard. You have to really dig into the numbers, but that chronic absentee rate is a public report. You just have to dig into it. Yes, the media will tell us. Well, no, they won't. First of all, many of them do not have the financial or personnel capacity to do that anymore. They are reporters. They are not journalists. That's my definition. To me, a reporter takes a press release or a media release from a government office or government official or a business, and they just copy and paste it. Usually without any hint of where the information actually came from. They may cite another news agency and copy and paste what someone else did. Also, a reporter, to me, one person comes in and says to the reporter, it's raining. Another person comes in and says, it's not raining. The reporter prints both of those and then cuts the commercial or a fundraising request. And you don't hear much more. A journalist walks to the window, looks out, sees what they see, and then they tell you that. Right? But that takes a lot of extra effort, and we don't have many news sources these days that are doing that. Some red flags for media reports that I personally use, where I have to look out for these. Intended target not hit. Well, that might be true, but how many shots were fired? Where'd all those bullets go? Did they come near anybody else? There's no danger to the public. To that I say baloney. If somebody fired a shot, there was danger to the public. Where'd the bullet go? How many bullets were there? There's no threat to the public. It was a targeted attack. Well, again, baloney. How many bullets were fired? Where'd they all go? We will follow up on this story. Now, that's just a plain lie most of the time. Because when you try to look for the story later on, there's no follow-up. Again, they may not have time to do it, but nevertheless, it doesn't occur. A survey says, well, that's always something to be suspicious of. Most surveys are based on voluntary responses. They are unverified. No one does anything to see that they're right. The people that like the result tend to publish the result more. And again, too many of them are only stated in percentages with none of the backup data. Any story that has a percent change, crime's down 22% among juveniles, all right, without the underlying data or at least a link to where to find it, uh, is something to be disbelieved or at least seriously doubted. And this area of street shootings is filled with that sort of thing. Also, politicians like to use, I call them weasel words. Uh, they're something that mean other than what they really are, so that they refer to a thing rather than people. It's not a street shooter problem, it's a gun problem. Well, that way you can pass a law about a thing and say you've done something about it when you haven't done anything about the people that are involved. And I think homelessness, unhoused, all these other things, they all suffer that same problem, and we let them get away with it. Uh, it's a way they claim they do something, even when we're sometimes surprised when we look later on and find, well, nothing happened. It didn't change. A truth. Kids know about catch and release, a phrase that's used to describe the fact that minors are rarely held, even when they're picked up with a gun, unless they cause an injury, sometimes even a serious injury. Uh, they are detained, but they may be detained only for a day or so. Sometimes, often, they aren't even charged with a crime. There is no arraignment. There is no prosecution. There is no punishment. They're just released. And often they're released with no cash bail. OR, on their own recognizance, means please promise you'll come back. Sometimes that doesn't work real well. The juvenile home is presently at less than 50% of capacity. Not dissing the juvenile home. They lack the funds, they lack the staff. But the fact is, half their beds aren't filled. And it's one reason why juveniles can't be, we can't put them in the general jail population. That's against the law, and they shouldn't be. That's a bad idea. But there's no place else to take them. One anecdotal example, in one case, I know of a 12-year-old stole 3 cars 3 days in a row, was apprehended each time, released, stole another car. Truth, the cops are underfunded and understaffed. It is not the largest police department in the state. We have one city commissioner that likes to keep repeating that falsehood. We have a rather unique public safety department. We've combined the police, the firefighters, and the emergency medical people all together. It's got a big union contract that requires it to be done that way. But I'm just telling you from my own personal discussions with them, we don't have a lot of regular firefighters that are out walking beats out on the mall. And we don't have a lot of beat cops and street cops that are running into burning buildings. All right, they tend to stay in their own lane, available for emergencies, given cross training, all very good things. But it's not the biggest department in the state. That's an excuse used for not funding it fully. Chief Boyson, I've spoken to him many times. He's a good guy. He's a good cop. He's a good leader, good chief. Lives under the thumb of the city manager, like every city employee does, and that has to create some concern on his part about how he does his job. And he also has to deal with an essential tension we have, and that is, how do we transparently enforce the law, provide public safety, while at the same time not damaging the image of the city? That is a big problem that they face. Staffing is chronically down. At least among police officers, KPSD is chronically down 20 to 25 off its authorized strength. Can't seem to fill it up. Offer $15,000 bonuses, salaries from 55 to, in fact, I saw one the other day, 90,000 that they're offering. But they don't seem to be able to make that. I think defund the police from a few years ago has had lasting effects. We also have a review board, a police review board. It's designed to handle complaints that are submitted and also to review reasonable force being used, and certainly if a shot is fired. It tends to go beyond what is placed before it. It reaches constant and repeated themes of profiling when they aren't raised by anybody involved in the case. It makes operation of the review board, I think, burdensome and not serving the function that it ought to. It also hunts non-existent problems, and so is the commission. The most recent one was they want the KVET cops, Kalamazoo Valley Enforcement Team, a combination of volunteers from various local agencies. They are essentially the undercover cops, all right? They operate in secret. They put themselves into, for want of a better term, criminal communities, groups of shooters, and they find out information which allows them to enforce the law. Most of these pictures I show you of weapons, those are KVET pictures. They're seizing weapons. Sometimes it's on an arrest after a crime, but very often it's before the crime occurs. Because they find out somebody's got an intent to do something, or some 16-year-old has a PMAG on one of his 9mm. They go in immediately and seize that. Really the only ones that do that very effectively. Well, the sheriff's department's fine, and so is the Department of Public Safety generally, but KVET specializes in that. The commission ordered Chief Boyson, and really it was the city manager that ordered Chief Boyson, that KVET officers could not wear masks when they conduct arrests. Now think about this. When they have an arrest, they have to have an identification of the perpetrator. Usually that is the KVET undercover officer who is providing that. If the KVET officer, if he or she goes in without a mask on and becomes identified, they have lost all value as an undercover officer forever. They can never do it anymore. And it's hard to recruit people to that job. It's a tough job. It's a dangerous job. And moreover, once they get identified as being KVET, they are not only in danger, but their family's in danger, and their home's in danger. Other places are successful. Portage just had, I think, a full recruiting for its police. Battle Creek has done the same thing. I think last year, Battle Creek got 17 new officers. So we've got some work to do there, and the fact is, the city of Kalamazoo has a bad reputation with experienced cops. They don't want to come here because they don't believe the city or the city's citizens support them. Truth, biggest enforcement problem, lack of identification, lack of eyewitnesses. In order to make an arrest, we have to have the perpetrator identified at the scene of the crime at the time of the crime. Eyewitnesses are tough to come by. Many of these crimes are committed where the only eyewitness is that single mom I talked about. And if she cooperates, her house is going to get shot up the next day. So she's not going to do that. We don't have a witness protection program in the city of Kalamazoo or in Kalamazoo County. So I don't blame them. One thing I do mark for you is video. The camera never blinks. When you read reports about shootings and arrests, see how often video was the critical evidence. Not an eyewitness, but a camera somewhere along the way that allowed the police to identify the perpetrator and make the arrest. What can we do? Well, the first part of any solution is to admit there is a problem. And that's where the city commissioner's statement struck me as so important. What we have been doing is not working. That's an important admission for everybody to make. I think we can learn more about handguns. Some of you have probably never touched a handgun. Some of you have probably never fired one. You know, you can go to any of the responsible commercial ranges around here, and for about $100, they'll fix you up with, don't use a 9mm street cannon. Let's try maybe a 22 or something like that, small pistol. They will give you instruction in safety. They'll see that you are safeguarded. They'll get you some eye protection and ear protection, which you should demand. And then they'll let you fire some rounds, usually at a very close by target. And you will see how difficult it is to hit anything, even at very close range. And it will also give you a real lasting impression of how destructive a firearm is and how destructive a bullet is. Learn more about cops. Great device, the Kalamazoo Citizen Police Academy. You can find it on the KDPS website. They offer it 2-3 times a year. It's offered jointly by the law enforcement agencies here in the county. It'll be a long day. You're going to start real early in the morning. You're going to stay till the evening. And during that time, you're going to go through, I don't know, 8, 10, or 12 different scenarios. A few traffic stops, one with a gun, a shooting incident where you find a bleeding body in the street, searching a dark house for an armed invader, talking to a neighbor who has a complaint about her cat, all right, her neighbor's cat. They'll give you all levels of things and show you how differently the police have to respond to those. They'll also do an artificial, what's the one with a mask on it, Tom? And virtual reality shooting in Bronson Hospital by an active shooter. And you'll have the pistol in your hand that operates with the laser dot, and you'll see how difficult it is to respond to that. You'll also gain an appreciation for how dangerous their jobs are and how many crucial life and death decisions they must make in milliseconds when they were on the street. Also, talk to the cops. Cops like to be talked to. I think most people, for some reason, are reluctant to do that. But as Kyle or Tom will tell you, every time I see a cop, I walk up to them, shake their hand, thank them for the job they do. I tell them my dad was a cop. That forms a connection. And then I ask them about stuff. And they're very open about it. They'll tell you things that the chief won't tell you. They'll tell you things the commission and the city manager won't tell you. And they're honest about it. They're straightforward about it. In terms of the recruiting too, you can learn very quickly by talking to them. They don't do it for the money and they don't do it for the medals. They do it to preserve and protect. They answer to a higher power about all these things. And we're very, very fortunate to have them out there. Learn more about shooters. The chief and the prosecutor say there's only a handful of them. Well, I think there's more than a handful. I would estimate the number is certainly less than 100. But there's still quite a few out there. And unfortunately, there's probably more coming on board every day. Chief Boyson says repeatedly, we know who you are. And they probably do. My dad was a cop in a small town, but every time a crime was committed, cops knew who committed it. It was more a matter, could they gather up sufficient evidence to authorize an arrest warrant? That was the hard part, much less to get a prosecution and a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. And the prosecutor says a small handful, and it's not the ones that appear their first time or even their second time. The ones that are a problem are the ones that see us the third, fourth, and 10th time into the system. So they tend to do it over and over again. And certainly other relevant factors, some of which we don't want to talk about, are residency, parents, past contacts, race. Be aware of the shooting reports. They do occur in the media. And if you go to the KDPS website, you can go to any of those social media and sign up, and they'll send you. They have a public information officer. Every time there's a shooting incident, I get it. Comes in my email, comes in my Facebook. It doesn't always tell you everything you need to know, but at least you're aware that they're out there, and they're trying to be more transparent than they have been in telling us about it. I think we ought to make kids' shooting information much more easily available. I think it ought to be a one-click tab at the top of the KDPS website. You shouldn't have to go 7 clicks deep and then not even know how many shots were fired. I think they ought to tell you, or at least estimate the number of shots fired. Admitted they may be wrong, but they're smart cops. They've seen lots of these before. They've got a pretty good idea every single time. I think the full police report should be online in real time with one click on the incident number. I live part of the year in Naples, Florida. In Florida, every report like that has an incident number, you put one click on it and the report pops up on the screen. There are no Freedom of Information Act procedures or anything like that to do it. Uh, Juvenile court case data. Well, you can't give out identification. I know there's some state statutes that get in the way, but I think there's some information we ought to have, such as the detention length. How long do you keep them there? An hour, day, week, month? Uh, Demographics, residency, truancy. When's the last time the kid was in school? Uh, Past contacts with the police, and most importantly, disposition. What actually happened? Did you just let them go? Or was there incarceration or some other punishment? Stop the catch and release. Figure out a way to fully fund that juvenile home. They need those extra beds to put some of these kids, for a while at least, and insist on enforcement. Insist that people that are involved with guns get charged. Equip the cops. The cops are not the problem. Uh, we need the cops to have weapons equal to the bad guys. And you can see from just the ones I showed you up here on the screen, some of those weapons are pretty substantial. They need more drones, very effective. KPD's used a lot of them in many different circumstances, a lot cheaper than a cop. They need more vehicles, again, a lot cheaper than a cop. I think even a taser or two might be a good idea. Again, all these are very controversial, but I think they are very effective. I think we ought to put cameras everywhere. Instead of increasing them 15%, which probably means there might have been 80 or 90 or 100 more, I think the city of Kalamazoo could probably have 10,000 cameras. You can start at the addresses on that shots fired incident report. Many of them tend to repeat, by the way, or they're near one another. And you can ask people. I think if you came to my block and said, we'd like to put 12 or 15 cameras up and down Bronson Boulevard, I don't think you'd get anybody to say no. Is there a privacy concern? Yeah, I suppose there is. But you don't have much privacy when you're dead, or even when you're severely wounded. And that's what we're dealing with. Join connectkalamazoo.org. You can find this on the KDPS website. If you have a Ring camera, something like that, you can sign up, and all you do is tell police I have it. Right? Or have one on the front door and the side door. It doesn't give them access to the camera, but they know it's there. So if a report of a crime is in that area, they will come to you and say, may we have consent to look at your Ring video data? And that sometimes proves very important, even for things that happen across the street or down the block. So please sign up for that and cooperate on that. I think we should control the review scope of the board. The review board, I think it's too broad, and I think it ventures off the reservation much too often. I think we should stop solutions for non-existent problems like masks on our KVET agents, which was really, even when they adopted that restriction, they said, well, it speaks more to the ICE problem on a federal level and the controversy about masks there. Well, fine, have that debate somewhere else. Don't limit our officers on that basis. And don't punish the cops for our problems, and require the funding priorities to change. City manager, mayor, and commission, we're getting a new city manager, goodness, because the present one's a jerk, all right? And he's not any good. He's been on a short and a long path towards retirement for a long way. We need a new person who is willing to ask the tough questions. We need a new person who is willing to discuss topics like these. That would be very, very helpful. Kalamazoo was a city manager form of government. Mayor and commission have very little power. I mean, they control a little bit about funding, but aside from that, they can't really do very much. City charter actually says they aren't allowed to talk to a city employee without the city manager's permission. Right? City manager is in charge. And all this is blamed, it should be blamed on the city manager. Any shortfall should be, because ultimately he or she's the authority in that regard. The commission's got to reorder their spending priorities. Here's a great idea. City Charter, Section 134, does authorize the City Commission to conduct an investigation. I don't think it's ever been done before. I can't find any record of it, at least. But they can issue subpoenas, they can call witnesses, they can put witnesses under oath, and they can do it all in a public forum. think an extensive 134 hearing on public and street shootings would be a darn good idea and would help us a lot with the information about it. Expose the problem and the myths and tackle the tough parts of this issue, like race, fatherless homes, parents that don't function, uh, schools that don't have any truancy enforcement. We need to talk about that. And it also must be done with non-retaliation for any of the witnesses, especially the cops, so that they can come in and tell the truth. And finally, I think we need to recruit a city commission candidate or somebody in city government that has a different view than all the rest of them. Right now, they all have exactly the same view. They come from the same political philosophy. They don't get elected unless they're endorsed by one particular political party. You can look at that for a period of many years here in town. They need at least one person there who is willing to ask a question, who is willing to bring a different viewpoint. And I think our city lacks that. Continue the soft programs. We have, I call them soft programs, we probably have a dozen or more programs to engage children, uh, get rid of gun violence, teach them not to use guns and violence as a response to their problems. So, those are great. And when you talk to the individual cops about it, they'll tell you they're great. They think they're wonderful programs. They staff them, they support them. And they'll also tell you, and they'll be effective about 10 years from now. But they aren't going to affect the current street shooters. They aren't going to affect the kids that are already probably out of elementary school, because if we don't catch them by then, they're gone. They're under the influence of others. They've got their gun. You know, we closed up the schools for 2 years. An awful lot of kids learned living on the street wasn't that bad. Bought himself a gun, got some drugs to sell, didn't have to go to school, didn't have homework, didn't have to pay any attention to anybody, had some cash in their hand, and didn't have to pay any attention to what mom or dad told them. That's what we're dealing with. And of course, the street shooters and the truants do not attend these soft programs. They are not there. So the focus, I think, should be on apprehension, prosecution, and punishment of the people that are actually pulling the triggers. And the only present solution is do what we need to do to get the shooters off the street and keep them off, because what we have been doing is not working. Thank you.
John, I'm wondering what happens to the guns after they're picked up? Are those confiscated or they're returned to the people who own them?
I think very well, first of all, if they're seized from a minor, they're an illegal weapon. So I'll guarantee you they aren't returned to the minor. All right. Uh, if a person is involved in a street shooting, that usually involves the commission of one or more crimes in and of itself. Uh, and if nothing else, the gun was discharged inside the city limits. That in itself is a crime. All right. Even if you shoot it straight up in the air. All right. Which is real dangerous because that bullet comes down too somewhere. Right. That's why we don't want people doing that. But I think very rarely will a seized gun be returned unless it is frankly seized in error. I haven't seen that yet. I suppose it could happen. But you know, if you were a lawful gun owner and your gun was properly stored and it wasn't illegally used and yet somehow it got seized by the police, I would suspect you would have a right to have it back. But I don't think that happens very often with the examples I showed you here.
Over 77% of guns used in crimes are illegal, not registered. So they may get returned to an owner, but that's the stat.
Yeah, and by registered, he means that they were not made part of an official authorized legal gun sale. Many of them even have the serial numbers purposely filed off, which makes it very difficult to trace where they come from or the history of them. You know, finding the source of these illegal guns would also be a great thing, but a very, very difficult task to do.
There are some firearms now that are just 3D printed off of, somebody's thing there with like machine parts and just plastics and metal tubing. So there's not even, you can build your own with information you can find online.
I think that's very true. In fact, you can also, with a 3D printer, you can make one of those auto sears, one of those switches. I don't think I'd put it in a gun and consider it reliable. All right. I mean, guns blow up too sometimes. But you're right. A lot of them are very easy. And by the way, too, those extended mags are not illegal in Michigan. That PMag that holds 50 rounds, not illegal in the state of Michigan. If you put it into a gun with an auto sear or a switch, it's illegal. If it's in the possession of a minor, it's illegal. But extended mags in and of themselves are not illegal in the state.
You suggested that what we need is a city commissioner who has a different point of view. Uh, uh, that's kind of a broad request. Uh, I'd say, from my experience, there have been some city commissioners who had a different point of view who were extremely effective in what they did and how they went about it. They had to learn that some things don't happen quite as fast as they'd like, but they learned a whole lot, and we learned a lot from them. But uh, if a person comes in with another point of view, they have to start with with asking questions rather than making accusations. Uh, uh, it's unlikely that anybody who's could get elected right now, of the people who are running it I know of, really has the kind of facts at their disposal that you just presented. And until they do have that level of understanding, they have to be careful in how they pose the questions or how they make the accusations, because they could be uh, how do you say um, canceled quickly. But I definitely agree with you that we could use more people on the commission who are willing to ask hard questions and stay with the follow up on the questions. And if they can find an ally or two, it will back them up so they're not isolated and dismissed as a kook. It could be very helpful. So I take your suggestion in a good spirit, and I hope that that can happen. Frankly.
Well, I didn't mean to be criticizing the present commission. I'm just saying it would be nice to have somebody that had a different voice. If a different voice wants to come in from the outside, you have a right to talk for 2 minutes. That's it. That's it. All right. Your microphone is cut off after 2 minutes. I think this topic deserves more than 2 minutes. That's all. All right, Barbara, you're going to take me to task about journalists.
No, I agree that with you totally, John, that this needs to be put center in front more, and that, the media is part of the problem, that it has not brought forth the facts. And so thank you. It needs to be. It's a crisis, and we need to keep it up front. Um, I remember walking door to door in the Reed Street neighborhood after a shooting, and everyone told me, and we were talking about this at the table tonight. Well, dude, I can get a gun for $25. I mean, the illegal guns. I mean, you pointed out the legal guns are not the problem. What can we do about this huge ready supply of illegal guns?
I wish I had a solution. I would be sure to share it if I did. Uh, it is not an easy problem to solve because there is so many of them, and because the commerce stream, the commercial stream, if you will, with them flowing into the black market is constant. It's absolutely constant. And I don't think people know where all of them come from. I suspect some of them come from foreign sources. Some of them come from criminal sources. You see a lot of stuff that a lot of them come from military sources. In other words, people in our own military services dealing in black market weapons. So very, very difficult to figure it out. Very difficult.
So I would argue, as part of the answer to Barbara, this is a human behavior problem. So if you look at any level of what you've described today, it's a human behavior problem. Whether it's the behavior of people who are in the in, involved in the sale of illegal weapons or the manufacture of illegal weapons via internet process, whatever. The kids that go out there and commit the crimes that you've described, that's a behavioral issue. So it's not, and you pointed this out earlier, I think, it's not the gun that's laying on the table or whatever that's committing the crimes and the killing. It's a person in some kind of context with a motive and with an incentive. And so is there a supply? Yes. Disincentivize the creation of that supply.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, let me jump ahead of you a little bit, is a ban on all guns or penalties to manufacturers of guns for the wrongs that their guns do. Okay, tell me what it is then, because I don't understand it.
No, legal sale of guns is legal, right? What's illegal? What is it that creates a gun that used to be legal and it no longer has a serial number on it? Somebody etched it out. That's a human behavior,
Yeah, typically
right?
they don't do
So,
that in public though.
right. But you have to disincentivize. So how does that happen? So, for example, in Singapore, why are there no drugs?
Well, they have a
They have
completely
severe
different.
penalties.
Oh, that too, but
They
have a,
disincentivize certain human behavior. That's what I'm getting at as a general point is disincentivize. That's what I'm suggesting is that's what we need to look at is human behavior, how you alter human behavior. A corollary to this in the back of my mind, or are you familiar with Roland Fryer of Harvard?
I've heard the name.
Okay. His research, he did research on police behavior by going out and riding with the police. Roland Fryer grew up in a broken home, drug addicted mother. He's black. He was raised ostensibly by his grandmother, and make a long story short, eventually became a professor at Harvard. Did real research on, remember back in before COVID, the popular myth, you talked about myths, that police kill more blacks out of proportion than whites. This was a myth. You know what formal study showed that to be wrong? Roland Fryer's study. You know what Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard, wanted to do when he found that out? And like I said, he did original research, unlike Miss Gay, who effectively plagiarized a bunch of things. And in the estimation of Professor Glenn Lowry of Brown and John McWhorter of Columbia wrote effectively book reports. Okay. So Fryer did real original research and found that was a myth. Now, he also found some behavioral issues with regard to non-lethal use of behavior by the police. But the point is that he did totally different arena of research on improving schools, which is very well worth looking at. But the people in charge at Harvard didn't want the results publicized. So there are, again, I'm just suggesting look at the human behavior and how you alter that. Human behavior is not, I'm not saying ban all guns. I'm not at all. I own a gun. I got a CPL. So I'm not in favor of banning guns. I grew up since 5 years old shooting guns. My grandfather had 12 guns in the freaking closet at the farmhouse. Okay. But they were all legal. So, and, I grew up respecting them. I grew up with proper supervision. So why is it that from 5 years old to today, I have never even thought about trying to commit a crime with a gun?
Well, I'll give you a positive possibility to you, and that is you became acquainted with guns at 5 years old, probably with the guidance of your father or some uncles. I had my first rifle when I was 12. 22 long Marlin with a scope, extensive safety training, extensive range training by my father and my uncles. Uh, Part of which is you don't point unless you're going to kill, and you don't do that. All right, you just don't do that. I think the problem with, and I'm trying to focus on, as you say, the human behavior. I can't solve the problem nationwide. I can't solve the problem of the Harvard literature. Uh, I'm looking at the city of Kalamazoo, and I want to focus on the person who is pulling a trigger out there. And how do you solve that? I think you do it the same way any other crime, and that is you apprehend people, you prosecute people, and you punish people, either by incarceration or otherwise. And I did bring up gun bans, and I will say, I think those are a political foil. I think they're one of the issues. I would compare it like abortion, that frankly the politicians don't want solved. They do too much to coalesce the base and raise money. And they aren't going to provide a solution in that regard. Moreover, given the present state of the law in the United States, if you're going to amend the Second Amendment, you're also going to have to amend the Fifth, and the 14th. And Congress is never going to propose that. And if you put together a constitutional convention, we're probably going to have to talk about a third term for a president of the United States in the course of that. All right. Nobody wants to go there. All right. Nobody wants to go there. Uh, but I think that talking about gun bans is just foolish. All right. It never gets anywhere. It raises a lot of money for people on both sides of the issue. Uh, but it doesn't help. Yes, Your Honor.
John, I want to thank you for your presentation. Very factual, on point. I agree with you on almost all of what you said. And as the Chief Circuit Probate Judge for Kalamazoo and the person who is in charge of, and everybody that works at the juvenile home eventually reports to me.
Am I wrong about any of that? I don't know.
You're wrong. There's a couple of nuances that
Good,
I want
tell
to
me.
point out, but I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank you for
Okay.
raising awareness of this issue. I mean, I started my day today at 7:45 a.m. with every chief of police from the county of Kalamazoo, with Jeff Getting, the prosecutor, with the person in charge of juvenile probation and the chief court administrator talking about juvenile gun violence at a meeting for breakfast. And so, I mean, this is right on point, and I thank you for raising awareness among community members who have influence in their communities. It's important what you're doing. A couple of nuanced points. The juvenile home, in fact, does have a maximum capacity of 64 kids that can be placed in it at any given time. We recently have been running numbers between 35 and 38 heads and beds every single night. There's a couple of reasons for that, but one thing, we did not build for current capacity of what the juvenile system produces for kids that need to be in detention. We learned our lessons from the past from having too small of detention facilities, and we built for future expansion. So we think we probably need to have 36 to 40 kids in beds at any given time. And in the future, if our population grows, we can raise that to the 64. So that's a little bit different than what was presented. So that's one
I've
point.
seen stories about it being understaffed too, and
We
that's
haven't-
one of the reasons. Is that a problem?
We really haven't had that problem for about the last year. We're fully staffed where we want to
Okay.
be, and we haven't been recruiting heavily. We are not subject to the recruiting bonuses that the sheriff's department has. It is difficult to recruit for those particular positions. It takes a special kind of person. I mean, imagine we don't have a lot of kids in third and fourth grade when it's what do you want to be when you grow up that say I want to work in a juvenile detention facility. That's not something that people want to do. They go to college, they figure out they want to do juvenile justice or something like that, and that comes to them. So we're in a sweet spot right now with the ability to lodge. We also have a new mid-level facility, which is kind of like KPEP that's coming online. That's being run by Family and Children's Services. It's called Glenn's House. It's actually on the facility of Family and Children's Services, where we can lodge 6 people, 6 youth males for short periods of time to kind of give them a respite. They don't qualify to be in the juvenile home overnight. The police have a place to put them so that we can keep them until their preliminary hearing. So we have some new tools coming online. But one of the things that has thwarted, and I spent a lot of time talking with the chiefs of police this morning, we had an agreement. I came to an agreement with Chief Boyson and the other heads of the departments and Jeff Getting in February of 2024, where we would agree to lodge any person that was picked up on a felony charge. That could be a gun charge, it could be whatever. If it was a felony charge, as of Valentine's Day of February 2024, we would lodge that accused felon at least overnight until we had a preliminary hearing. And things went really well for the summer of 2024, and we saw a dip in some of the numbers. And Chief Boyson was very happy, Prosecutor Getting was happy, and we had kids lodged, and we're doing what was right. Part of the problem is not local; it's at the state level, because the state changed the rule and kind of pulled the rug out from under us and set some new juvenile justice legislation in place that the governor signed. And so now we have a screening tool that every time a police officer arrests a kid, they get brought to the juvenile home. We first screen them to see if they're drunk or high or, need to go to the hospital. But after that, we screen them on a criminogenic screening tool to see if they should be lodged. If they score a 4, 5, or 6, then they get lodged. If they score a 1, 2, or 3, they go home. And so it was meant to solve a problem that was in Detroit and in Genesee County and Macomb County. And they fixed a non-existent Kalamazoo problem. And instead of what they thought was going to happen, which was reduce the number of juvenile detainees, we've since went from running 25 or so detainees on any given night to what I told you, the 35 through 38. So we have some well-meaning folks in Lansing, like in a lot of other fields, making rules for Kalamazoo and other localities that don't really count. And the other thing that I wanted to point out that would help you as you take this to other places is, and Tom knows that there's often, in fact, almost 100% of the cases, there's a difference between the charge code or the charge that the police pick up a kid with and that they put in their police numbers, and then the code or the actual charge that the prosecutor ends up charging. And so that leads to some releases. So I would point that out. But again, I'm going to end where I started, which is anything that you can do or anybody here that can raise awareness of this problem, get smart people thinking about how to solve it, is a step in the right direction. And I congratulate you on having the foresight and the bravery to stand up in front of a group like this and to bring this to us, John.
Well, thank you for your comments, Your Honor.
First of all, John, I applaud you with your detail, your research, everything. This is outstanding. I appreciate the judge's comments. I think KPEP and working with the young, that is outstanding to hear some of those creative ideas. I suggest that you contact, or maybe some people can contact the Michigan Municipal League, the county government, MAC, and maybe even the Township Association, and have you or somebody present these facts to those leaders. Because I think that the more the leaders that are elected understand what's going on in this issue, then working together, it's not a single bullet type of, sorry for the pun, but there isn't a single solution to this. It goes from the family all the way through to everything you talked
Very
about.
lots of lawyers. All
And
right,
and
lots of lawyers.
and I just wanted to share a couple of personal experiences that I had in short career in public service. Um, when I was at Western, and Howard Dooley was one of my professors. When I was at Western, I was armed robbed at one of my dad's store and had a gun right to my head. And I had to, and I tell you, it took me 3 years to get over it. And I won't get any more detail, but I know what it feels like to have and ultimately the guy was a drug addict and played Russian roulette and blew his head off. And so, but it was an experience I'll never forget. And then the other experience, and well, I was on the city council, and I think every single commissioner and council person should ride along with a police officer for 12 hours.
Very
And
good.
you'll understand that they go to domestic violence, they go in and you don't know what's going on, or even a shooting at a house. I mean, I experienced all this with Jerome Bryant when he was an officer, and I got to tell you, their adrenaline goes this high, and then for a couple hours it's down, and it's the most difficult job that I can imagine. And I rode along with that, and I never will forget that. Now I'm going to finish on a more positive note. Um, when I was in the legislature, I went ahead and ran with they have trooper school, Michigan State Police, and ran 10 miles with them, and it's really outstanding. You know, they're so great. You know, they sing, like, who are you going to call? Super Trooper, and all this kind of stuff. And then they go in and show me the push-ups and all this kind of stuff. And then they say, hey, you want to go shoot a gun? And I don't like guns at all, because I had one pointed on my head. And so I go in and they have the 9mm, and they get ready and they say, okay, now shoot it. And I go, doo, 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 doo. And I said, how'd I do? And I was like, this is exciting. It's adrenaline. And they said, well, you didn't kill him, but he's hurting. I pulled down the trigger and hit him right below the belt each time.
You can't ride in the car, but you can go to the Citizens Police Academy again. Go to KPSD and sign up. It's a great experience.
John, thank you very much for that informative and interesting talk. To our guests, it's good to have you here, and please come back again, and we hope they consider joining the Torch Club. And to our members, we'll see you next month, October 15th, when Sharon Carlson talks about Dr. Martin Luther King's 1960